Okay. Hey, welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. This is James Just. With me today is Jason McPhee. Jason, there's a question today about what is actually a dictatorship. That's kind of what I want to cover, because it seems to me that more and more on our daily lives are being interjected with things like executive orders or laws being passed that kind of counteract long-standing traditions of, open governance. It seems like the Brown Act is no longer paid attention to or deliberately manipulated to serve the interest of the bureaucracies and instead of the people. And now we have proposals in the California Legislature right now that is actually encouraging government secrecy. They're trying to make it more difficult for the media, the public, to access Freedom of Information Act. Basically basic information that should be free for all of us to access. And they're passing more and more laws, more and more regulations, redefining certain terms so that they're not violating California constitutional rights. But it seems to me that we are headed down into, if not a banana republic, a straight-on dictatorship, even if it's dictatorship by elections. But when you only have one party, it's still pretty much a dictatorship. Are you seeing the same type of thing I am?
Well, I mean, we certainly, having lived through COVID, it's hard not to have. Obviously, you're talking about a little bit after COVID here, that this seems to be getting progressing down at the local level, but. I just still can't get over how alarming it was what happened during COVID. I mean, the idea that we literally couldn't talk about medications online and other things if it didn't have the government's approval. These things would just get censored, and we found out that the government was colluding with these social media companies at the same time to do these things. So I just...
Well, we call it colluding. When the government comes knocking and says, "Hey, we want you to do this," it kind of comes with while other politicians at the time, if you guys don't, wagging their finger, threatening investigations or new laws or regulations or something, are they collaborating or are they just saving their own skin? And how many of us wouldn't do something similar? Save our own skins. It's we talk about these social media companies collaborating, and some of them probably were. But I think some of them were more or less forced into this kind of action. They had no choice. Otherwise you've got the government that's going to come shut you down.
Oh, yeah.
Or make your life miserable until you quit, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually what they had happening at the time, I believe Elizabeth Warren and others were essentially threatening a lot of these companies, telling them that, essentially if you allow this disinformation, misinformation, whatever kind of information it was that didn't agree with their opinion, essentially, that, that they were alarmed and that they were going to take action against these companies. And, so I think in some respect, these companies may have been, trying to protect their backside a little bit. But I think also, too, what we saw at Twitter especially is that there was this culture that seemed to, I guess, have sort of evolved from the universities, I guess, among a lot of their staff. And it seemed to be one particular political ideological bent. And, as long as it was the party that they favored, the stuff went through unquestioned. I mean, I don't know how many things that we found out after the whole pandemic that were just flat out wrong from the government. And none of those things ever got questioned. There was no marking later of something like, Fauci even admitted that he lied about masks at one point, and they didn't ever put anything on him to say, hey, misinformation, disinformation. It was just like, oh, okay, well, now the definition has changed because our side said it did.
I know, and we experienced that here. Our YouTube have got strikes and videos were taken down, and then like 6-9 months later, it just kind of magically, the strikes and the takedown just kind of magically disappeared. We were all back to normal, and no one ever said anything. right? They send you all these notes. You shouldn't have said this. They don't tell you exactly what you did wrong, but they tell you, you spread some misinformation, something, so you should fix that. Okay, but where? And then 6 months later, it just kind of goes away. It was a permanent strike. No, it goes away 6 months later, and they don't say, "Oops, sorry, we made a mistake. It was our bad."
Yeah.
No, nothing of that. It just kind of, they don't even inform you it goes away. You just notice because one day you log into your thing and says, "Hey, wait, where'd our strike thing go?" And so it doesn't even a left-right thing, because we don't sit on that spectrum, on that political spectrum, the left-right spectrum. Libertarians don't really sit on that spectrum.
That is interesting, though, because you say we don't, but I don't think we do. As a libertarian, I think there's some things the right used to be for that we were okay with, and there's some things the left used to be for that we were okay with. But the crazy thing is, it seems to be that nowadays there's maybe a few things that the right does that we're sort of okay with, but the left has sort of abandoned all the things we used to be okay with them, like free speech. I mean, that was the one thing you used to be able to count on the left to be standing for, and now the ACLU won't even stand up, for free speech without reservation. I mean, before they were literally defending Nazis and Skokie, and now they won't do that anymore. And they've literally said, "Hey, look, we've got our priorities now."
The priority is no longer free speech. The priority is no longer freedom. The priority is a political agenda. And that's really the problem, right? They no longer have, neither party no longer has a fundamental belief. We've seen so many times where when one party does something, they flip out, but when something similar happens to their party, oh no, it's fine. And it doesn't matter, Republicans, Democrats, they both do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And we're going to move on. California is setting to make it more difficult for parents to passionately participate in things like school board meetings or water board meetings. I think it's really the school boards, the target of these new regulations, these new redefinitions of laws. But it will apply to everything, right? Your city council, your water board. It will count on all of these things. But really, they're going after parents because parents are mad at the politicalization of the education system. And so their solution to that is, hey, let's depoliticize the education system. No. The solution to that is we're going to increase the politicization of the school system, and we're going to make you complaining about it loudly illegal, and you'll now be treated as a criminal. While we manage, real criminals are looting stores and stealing catalytic converters and breaking into cars and breaking into houses and not being prosecuted.
Yeah, no, it certainly seems like an upside down world, but I can't help but think that one of the standards I guess they're changing is, I guess before the way the law used to be written was that if you were threatening or harassing an employee of the school, then that was the grounds that they would use to potentially arrest you. But this is they've gone beyond that. What they want to do now is they want to redefine this law, I believe, to essentially say if you are disruptive of, disorderly or disruptive. Well, the whole point of having these meetings is to get people's feedback, and some people are passionate and they want to say things loudly or whatever. I mean, what kills me too is that, you see some of these teachers in these schools, and they are promoting that kids go out and essentially march for their political ideologies. But then, here, when parents want to come in and essentially protest something that they don't agree with the school, suddenly they want to arrest them. I mean, this is just, seems to be beyond the pale.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. When I phrase this this episode as, what is a dictatorship? Well, what is a dictatorship? Is a dictatorship just some solo guy, a theoretical Hitler or a Mussolini or whatever, dictating, laws on down? Or is it a small group of people who are essentially unresponsive to the needs and wants of the actual populace, who will manipulate the systems that get them elected, and then they do this kind of thing where average routine behavior now becomes criminalized while criminal behavior becomes protected. something is really strange here in the state of California, and I'm not exactly sure, where we go from here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I find the most alarming is, as far as sort of libertarian ideology, free market ideology goes, we kind of understand the idea that if people want to concentrate power in government, that's going to lead to problems. You're eventually going to get authoritarian rules because when you concentrate that power, somebody's got to be making the decisions. And same thing with socialism. If you put the property in the hands of government, then somebody there has to make the decisions for everything. And so eventually that sort of gets concentrated and streamlined down to where the public really doesn't have a lot of input in it. But so we understand that part of it, and I can see how some of these things are occurring. What I don't understand is some of the craziness of how they're just allowing people to destroy these downtown areas, to just walk in, grab stuff with, if it's under $950, I think you can just walk out the door with it. And, I guess it's technically a misdemeanor, but nobody is going to enforce it here in California. So it's just, we see all of these stores. We just did a show on the knuckleheads with the National Federation of Independent Business. And I mean, they're seeing all of these businesses leave the state, and it's just it's crazy. We see all these Walgreens around. In fact, there was a guy who put together a video on YouTube where he was in San Francisco just a couple weeks ago, and he was just walking down Market Street, and almost every business was shut down. It's like it was like a needle in a haystack to find the businesses that were still running on Market Street, which is.
Well, there is a long-term side benefit to that, because eventually those prices will have to come down to a point where people will be able to come down into those areas and actually revitalize them, right? There will come a time. Now, the people who own those buildings are going to take a bath. They're going to get wiped out economically, and so hopefully most of those are, hedge funds or something that owns a lot of that stuff. But, if there's any mom and pops left owning some of that land down there, their retirement fund has essentially been wiped out simply because California Democrats don't know how to balance the needs of everybody, right? Mm-hmm. They've chosen that we went from, well, we shouldn't really be punishing people who are stealing bread. Okay, maybe fair enough to eat themselves, to feed themselves. Okay, we should probably be getting them on food stamps or great. Okay, I don't want to be putting someone who's generally trying to feed their children into jail. It doesn't help. Okay, let's find something to do to help. But we've gone way past the people who are. What's going on now is no longer, even if it ever was, it's no longer shoplifting. Shoplifting is no longer shoplifting. This is just criminalized behavior. And they're ignoring it because they don't want to admit that they were wrong. They just don't want to admit they were wrong.
And there's a moral failing too. I mean, the idea of once you say that, hey, somebody else has to take the hit for shoplifting, then there's no end to it, right? Because I mean, at some point you're one winds up virtue signaling out of somebody else's wallet, and I mean that's the problem for libertarians, I think, is that. It's one thing if we all reach into our own wallet and help somebody out, and, that would be the way to go. But to say, I'm going to look the other way if you steal from that guy, and that's it's like a little theft is good. Yeah.
A little theft is okay. Okay, but who gets to decide what's little?
Yeah.
And so that's and one last thing about this, talking about dictatorship, is one of the things we've noticed is moving on is that we've had more and more of our lives are being run by executive order, right? Whether it's a mayor or a governor or the president, more and more of our laws, and not just minor things, major issues are being just signed off. Now we're just going to change the whole law. We're going to completely avoid the normal political process. We're going to ban gas stoves with an executive order. We're going to change the way people, travel by executive order. We're going to change the way people communicate by executive order. It's gone crazy. And what's most disturbing, I'm not even mad at the politicians anymore. If we're going to let them do it, why won't they? If they're receiving absolutely no pushback, then why wouldn't they? We're sending the signals that this is okay. And so whose fault is it really?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this comes straight from the top. I mean, we see these signals that both parties are very appreciative when they see their president just sign something and say, this is the way it is today, right? And you'd see Trump proudly show off his executive order. You'd see Obama do it. You'd see Biden do it. And, and it's one thing after another where they're literally just doing things with very little review. The odd thing was, it was funny that Obama seemed to be able to sign some of these executive orders with no problem, but when Trump would sign some of them undoing what Obama did, suddenly he'd have all of these courts jumping on him for like executive review, that he didn't go through, the Administrative Procedures Act or something like that, in order to enact some of these executive orders that he wanted to do. So I don't know, but the bottom line, though, is that we're saying, hey, we want government that gets something done. Well, actually what we should be wanting to do is get government off our backs so we can get something done.
Right, exactly, because the government's never going to do what we want them to do. It's just not. We're actually asking the government to do something that's impossible, and then we wonder why they're failing. Ask them to do less and let them focus on that, and they might actually be able to accomplish some of it. But we've asked them to do so many things that quite frankly, it's impossible to do. I don't know. So there is one more executive order we want to talk about. Biden has signed an executive order creating a national monument in Arizona. I think it was Arizona. And it has cut off millions of acres of uranium mining. And so on one hand, they're sitting here complaining, we need to get off fossil fuels. We need to get off fossil fuels. The fossil fuels are damaging. So what's the best option for that, as we libertarians have been talking about for decades, is nuclear is the safest, cleanest option, right, when you take everything into consideration. But yet, every single time these people will make getting uranium or going nuclear more and more difficult, despite the fact that France and other European countries have been able to do these small nuclear power plants completely safely for decades. But yet, we're stuck on stupid and continue to do things like this by an executive order, taking millions of acres of public land out of public use. That's what actually happens when they do these national monuments. They take public land out of public use and restrict it to less and less and less people. And I don't know, this, Jason, this is one of those things that's do these people actually think through their policy decisions? Do they think through, well, we want to get off of fossil fuels, but we're going to make it impossible to have cheap nuclear energy? Do they even think this stuff through?
Well, yeah, and this is the problem. I mean, once you go down the road of saying that climate change is an existential threat, that means that a lot of your alternatives are suddenly better, right? Because once you say existential, it doesn't get much worse than that, right? So the idea that nuclear was just simply scary to some people, they were worried that, they were going to, get bitten by a radioactive spider or something. I'm not sure what, but I mean, we had a plant here near Sacramento, Rancho Seco, and I remember when I was a kid that was operating. And one of the final straws of why they shut down is because they caught a few employees with marijuana. Now, can you imagine, here today, catching somebody with marijuana? It's like, oh, you give them a pat on the back, and maybe there's a government program for that.
All I remember about Rancho Seco is that it was always broken down.
Yeah, that too.
That's all I remember about Rancho Seco. It was always broken. And so when they finally voted to put the thing down and go, well, it never worked in the first place. So I suppose it's better than just sending good money after bad. Of course, we're still spending money on it. You never actually completely decommission those kind of things. Yeah. So it may have been better off to actually have, rebuilt it. Yeah. That's just, who knows?
Well, the crazy thing about nuclear, too, though, is that there are some smart people in government who realize that, hey, look, this has to be part of the solution. Stephen Chu, who was Obama's Secretary of what do they call it, Secretary of Energy, or head
Department of Interior,
DOE.
Secretary of Energy, one of those,
Yeah. But he was an advocate. He said, look, that has to be part of the path to get to to our carbon neutral energy grid and stuff. So and it's just like nobody would listen to him. And this guy's a Nobel Prize winner.
Nuclear works when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. The nuclear will sit there and continue working. And you need a baseline, right?
Yeah.
It's
gotta
fine.
have that base load. Yeah.
It's fine. Wind and solar is fine. For those times when it works. But you need a base load that you can kind of ramp up and down as needed, which is what we use hydro for as well, because you can do the same thing to hydro. You can ramp hydro. It's just
well, this is the crazy thing too. I mean, it's like there's an issue of trade-offs here, and if you are going to say that this is a problem that you're willing to throw the kitchen sink at in terms of climate change, well, you've literally got nuclear, and then they start complaining that nuclear is too expensive. And wait a second, you're willing to throw the kitchen sink at this? I mean, literally charge everybody all kinds of extra fees for everything, and yet you're not going to consider nuclear. In fact, they even dumped all this money on this bullet train, that essentially is, every time you drive down Highway 99, I think it is, or 5, I can't remember which one. I think it's 99, and you drive by there, and it's just you just see these hulking remnants of track that they were trying to build that have never been finished, and it's just
but wait, didn't Florida build a high-speed rail within the time frame already, and it's like going?
Yeah.
But it was a private contractor that built it. It wasn't a public. It was a private railroad that built one, and now they're building one from LA to Vegas. A private, again. They didn't need the government money. They didn't need votes. They just said, hey, this one, if we build a high-speed rail from Vegas to L.A., we'll get enough riders to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so they said, yeah. So they built one.
Yeah.
And so if you find those routes that actually can support the high-speed rail, great. You don't need government money to build those.
Yeah.
You just need government to get out the way.
Well, and that's what price signals are for. I mean, we don't need somebody from the top to figure out what the smartest route is. Price signals will literally just come up from the bottom and tell us what the smartest routes are, and that's probably why you're getting one from LA to Vegas, because it makes a lot of sense to have that short drop. To
it's
LA.
a nice, relatively easy piece of track to lay. Nice flat straight. You can run. There's not much in between. There's no real stops. So it makes logical sense for high-speed rail there, but because political needs became more important than realistic needs in California's high-speed rail, it becomes this mess that it is. So we were talking earlier about how social media companies were essentially censoring people. Well, we've got another one here in the last recent days. A Nobel Prize-winning climate scientist has says he doesn't believe there's a climate crisis, and rather than having a discussion about what's his thoughts, they've just attacked him. He says, you're all the normal routine stuff that we just don't going to go in here to her again, but they've attacked rather than dealing with his actual opinions and the facts and dealing with the details. They're just going to attack him as like we've heard, you're a right-wingist, you're political, you're everything, whatever, anything but actually discussing issues, right?
Yeah, and this is the sad thing, is that when you have big problems like this, something like climate change, that you're going to say, okay, this crosses jurisdictions, it's not a local problem, you've got to have public discussion. You can't simply dictate from the top and say, thou shalt do this, thou shalt do it, because not everybody's going to agree with you. And this is a global issue too. It's not a single jurisdiction issue. So the idea that some of these people, they just want to make rules and call some people misinformation or disinformation is crazy. Let the public figure it out for themselves by hearing smart people from both sides get together and talk about it. I mean, I thought that's what grown-ups were supposed to do.
Well, I think one of the problems we actually have is in discussion, we say people from both sides. Well, no, just have the discussion.
Yeah.
There isn't actually sides. There's just a discussion about all the various issues. There might be 10 sides. There might be 2. There might be 100, depending upon the exact details of the situation. So just sit down and have an actual, honest, human discussion about issues instead of, oh, well, this person disagrees with me, so he must be an idiot. Well, he won the Nobel Prize, so he might be wrong, but he's not an idiot. I think, can we get to that?
Yeah, and this is the thing. I mean, immediately the ad hominems come out. They start calling people deniers if you're not agreeing. This was the crazy thing. I mean, we literally saw a huge parallel with this through COVID. Where if you did not go along with whatever the line was from the bureaucracy, from the from the administration, then you were essentially considered a denier of sorts, and then say, we're going to shut you down.
Blasphemer!
Exactly. Yeah.
Shun the blasphemer. Well, take me out blasphemy. We're going to move on real quick because we only got a few minutes. California doctors are suing the medical board over the mandatory implicit bias training. So essentially what's happened is the medical board has decided that if you're a doctor, you have to go through and do bias training. Whether you have any bias issues or not, they're just going to assume that you are a biased human being and you must go through training. This is sounding an awful lot like, the struggles of, struggle sessions of Mao's China, does it not?
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrific. Once again, let the market sort it out. If you have a doctor who is, insensitive to one group of people, that doctor is going to lose that group of people's business to people who are, there's word of mouth. I mean, believe it or not, patients talk with each other about their doctors, and they say, oh, I like my doctor, and somebody says they don't like their doctor. Well, guess what? The ones that, seem to be doing better for whatever reason, they tend to get more patients want to come to them, right? So,
and the hospital can go, none enough of your patients like you, so we're letting you go.
Yeah.
Right? That's what can happen. You not enough patients like you. You have a high rejection rate, so we're letting you go. You don't even need to get to this, right? Just the high rejection rate, the high turnover rate of patients would be a signal to a hospital or an organization. So he's going to have to go into private practice, and in private practice, so he's just going to get the customers he wants, right? Or the customers who want him, or her. Maybe there's a choice. So a lot of women only want to see women doctors. Mm-hmm. Is that a bias?
Yeah, and they should be allowed to have that bias.
I have no problem with it. Yeah. If a male person only wants to have a male doctor, is that, it used to be that was wrong. There was a time, I remember there was a time when I was a kid, I had a female doctor. I was a teenager, 16 years old, and I had a female doctor, right? And it was a little weird, but I got over it, right? But what if I didn't want to get over it and I wanted a male doctor? At the time, I was told that would have been wrong. No, you've got a female, just deal with it. Okay, I'll deal with it. I was better off as a human being for having to be forced to deal with it, right? I was better off as a human being. But should I have been forced to?
Well, and this is the beautiful thing about markets, is that you pay a price for an irrational bias. And if you're so biased that you have this, the best doctor and you're not willing to take him for whatever reason because of some goofy bias, like you don't like their skin color or something else, you may wind up dying because of that. And that's literally the price you may be paying by choosing the wrong doctor for your irrational bias. So rational bias has a cost, and ultimately that kind of helps to, there's the moral hazard. It helps to sort things out. We don't need a parent in government telling us exactly,
your finger,
you do this, you do that.
You must do this because we say it's good. Well, it may be good for you, but maybe not. Not everything is that simple. And for us, we want to thank you, Jason, for being here tonight. We want to thank you for watching. We want to thank the crew inside for working so hard and dealing with all the issues that come up. So good night, and please remember to love everybody.